Dustin. How you doing, man?
I am doing fine, and I will speak to the technical issue. Just so you guys know, I'm actually a Linux guy. I run Linux on my desktop and my laptop here, and per usual, Zoom is always a fun experience. But if anybody wants to talk about running Linux on the desktop, I'm your guy.
That's really fun. So, why do you use Linux as your desktop? I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah, I started my career as a Unix admin, fresh out of college. Somebody gave me some IBM equipment. And I've just always kind of been in a Unix, then a Linux guy. I did transition to Windows for a couple of years, um, particularly the pre 365 days. But once I started moving to 365 as an MSP, I was still using Windows just because some tools as an MSP you need to be Windows. But I was like, oh my goodness, everything's web based. I don't really need this Windows software. And the Linux desktops now are so powerful. I'm a developer. It's just a very seamless experience. And particularly if you're doing AI coding, having Linux as your base system, it makes everything hyper smooth. Um,
Really?
yeah, if I was an Adobe graphics person, Linux would be a horrible decision.
Sure.
But if you're doing any kind of technical work, Linux is such a powerful base platform, and I'm not arguing that it doesn't have security issues, but we do have an edict here. All of our developers have to run Linux. It just reduces entry points into our environment, reduces the risk of, fly by night clicks that can download a Trojan. It gives us just a little bit of extra security because we're dealing with important data.
That's really cool. I never realized that like Linux would have AI run so much smoother.
the
So
the
that's
tool chain of development on Linux, because when I'm on a Windows box, I just spin up Windows, the subsystem for Linux, WSL. And so I
yeah.
literally have the Linux inside of Windows all the time. So I'm like, what am I doing? I should just have my Linux box again. So I just went and reinstalled everything, and then we came to an agreement as developers. Hey, look, this is increasing security. We're probably the most high risk positions in a SaaS platform, a company. And so we agreed we're all going to move to hardened Linux boxes for our laptops.
You know what? That makes perfect sense. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to share my screen for just a brief second to make sure we're all on the same page of what's going on. First and foremost, I want to apologize. I forgot to enable the uh, I don't remember what it's called. The
Production
production,
or
yeah, the production studio. So I'm not able to do all the fancy like multicam stuff that Zoom would allow me to do. Um, but today this is going to be all content. Okay, we're going to take a couple minutes in the middle here, and we're going to do. I'm going to call it commercials, and then we'll go right back into the content. All right. So we have answers that are all over the place, mainly because I made them both multiple choice instead of single choice. So I am going to pick an item on here, unless you want to tell me in the chat. Um, where does your team hit the most friction day to day? If you had to pick just one, escalations that shouldn't need to be escalated, work piling up on a few key people, constant interruptions breaking focus, clients with unclear or shifting expectations, too many tools, not enough integrations, um, firefighting instead of following process, or maybe something else I didn't think of. And then if you had to pick just one thing to fix about your operations this quarter, what would it be? Ticket flow and escalation paths, team structure and role clarity, documentation and process consistency, client onboarding and expectations, capacity planning and workload balance, metrics and visibility into performance. So if you guys, I'll share the results. That way, if you guys need to like see those answers in the chat, uh, feel free to just put something in the chat and we will pivot based
I
on your
love these questions,
responses.
by the way. They're really good.
Thank you. Thank you. So, while they do that, if they do that, um, Dustin, you said you're a developer. What on earth do you do? Like, what? Why should anyone listen to you, man? Did you run an MSP? What's your background?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the 2 minute overview of how I got here. So I started as a developer, and the way I got into the MSP was interesting. I worked for a couple of dot coms. If anybody's old enough to know what I'm talking about, so Um, early 2000s, I worked for some companies, and this is why I was running Unix platforms. I did streaming media, particularly music, and those were not making money at the time. So the last one I worked for went bankrupt. I started doing security consulting and development for state agencies. Did a bunch of writing, speaking, did it all the thing. And then one day I was just like tired of the feast or famine of it. So I started billing people monthly. And then 5 years later, I found out, oh, this is called a managed service provider. So I
Mhm.
actually started doing it and then found out later, oh, the name for this type of model is MSP. And so I did that for several years, grew the company. It was a pretty sizable MSP. I think we grew up to like 17 people. We had a training division, everything. And so I've been through it all. We went through the C-level process. We were in different peer groups, did several presentations at conferences. So I was definitely in the thick of an MSP, and I did a successful exit. And I think having gone through an exit and what that looks like and really what the value is in MSP and that process, it helps me have some context for what a lot of MSP owners are actually trying to accomplish. And because I was an MSP owner, I also understand the pain of the journey at times. And so I have a lot of context when I speak about MSPs and software, our tool set, and just the industry at large.
Awesome. Well, for those of you that don't know me, hi, I'm Steve Taylor. I do webinars here at Alternative Payments. Before this, I ran an MSP for over a decade. I have been an IT professional in some capacity since 2002. So that's over 20 years. And boy, do I feel old. Um, so that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Dustin. You know what? We're just going to dive right in. Dustin, uh, when you walk into an MSP, and they have escalations that are broken. What does it look like?
Well, that's a great one. So you have two types of, and I'll say this: I speak a little bit as an MSP owner. A lot of my input on these kind of questions is now that we have access to so many help desks through our software
Mhm.
because we automate triage, assignment, and scheduling. And the size of our clients is from several technicians to 70 technicians. So I've seen it all. And
Okay.
the good news is, particularly at the beginning of an engagement for the MSP owners out there listening to this, everybody goes through these struggles. It's not just you. All MSPs really have to put a lot of effort into how their help desk work because they don't work naturally. Like you have to have a system. It has to be rigid for a help desk to really be effective. So the two main reasons I've seen escalations not work is one, you don't have escalations. There's definitely help desk out there that say, look, we're very horizontal. Everybody's expected to pick up tickets.
Yeah.
Everybody's expected to pitch in. And then they struggle to grow their help desk. And
Mm.
it's just like a national economy. You have to specialize, right? To have any kind of real growth because you have to become more productive. You cannot have your network engineer doing password resets. And you
Why
cannot
not?
have a level one technician installing Meraki and setting up the VPN, right? Like
Why?
although in all fairness, Meraki is pretty easy. And,
Yeah.
and the reason is you have like a disconnect between one salary levels. You don't want your 80 $100,000 person resetting passwords. And the other thing is typically those network engineers have years of experience that help prevent mistakes that the level one's just not ready for. And so
Got it.
not having any tiers or levels, it feels I guess, more democratic. I don't know what the word is. It feels fair, but it's not. It really just puts strain on the system. So not having any type of escalation process will work. So when you have 3 texts, it will stall you out when you hit 6 or 7 texts. You must have escalations once you hit 6 or 7 texts. The other issue is when you have people escalating just to one person, that becomes a nightmare. The one person that keeps getting all the escalations is just not going to come into work one day.
They're the bottleneck, one, and two, that like, man, you better be paying that one person really well too.
A huge risk for you. It's stressful for them because they're effectively on call all the time.
Yeah.
And so you got a real problem on your hands with that. So money's always
So
a
you should just have everyone be an L3, right? You don't even need L1 or L2.
yeah. Well, generally in a well performing help desk, you want to really, you have a pyramid. You have your tier one, tier two, and potentially tier three. You really want that tier one to be real fat. Like you want it to have a lot of people in it. And then you really want to be narrowing it down quickly as you go up to different levels inside of an escalation path. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. You want tickets to stay in at tier one as much as possible.
Okay. All right. So is would you say that this how much of this is we've never defined what we should escalate versus people are afraid to make the wrong call?
Yeah. I would say it's more about not having a clear definition of when you need to escalate. Particularly once you create an escalation path, the bigger problem generally is over escalating because your tier one is not clear on what they need to own and how long they have to work on a ticket. So something you shouldn't tell a technician in tier one is, hey, if you can't solve this, escalate the ticket. Okay. Does that mean 8 hours of work or 8 minutes of work? I don't know. So you want to give tier one clarity. Hey, work on this. You're sprinting to a solution. If you can't solve it in 47.3 minutes, you're going to escalate it. If you escalate it, you better have gathered this minimum set of data, right? You better have like gone through these checklist items and documented these problems, and then you escalate it. And that is part of the work you're doing in that 43.2 minutes. And so you want to give your technicians total clarity on when to escalate, not just that they can escalate. So again, I,
Right.
I would say that those are generally the problems we see when you do allow escalations in your organization.
Okay. Um, when someone says my L1s escalate everything, what's actually happening underneath that? Because they should be able to do some things, right?
Well, again, the number one fix for that is giving them a time limit and a minimum
Mhm.
expectation for the escalation, right? So the first thing you need to implement when you have that pain is give them the amount of time. You will work 45 minutes on this ticket before you escalate it. And here's the minimum steps before you escalate a ticket. If you do that, instantly you're going to cut off 50% of the escalations. Right, 45 minutes is a random number. It could be whatever works for your organization. Um, Now, if they keep escalating too much, you either have a person problem or a documentation problem. So if they're escalating tickets because they should when they should be able to fix them, you have an HR problem. You probably need to let that person go. If you're escalating tickets because the technician just is moving quickly and cannot find the documentation, then you got a real serious problem in your hands and you're just not a very well performing MSP. You need to spend some time documenting process. And one of the struggles MSP, particularly smaller MSPs, have, and the reason they're not larger, is that they don't fully standardize the environment. So the technicians having to relearn every ticket what to do.
Okay. Let's bounce over to so we talked about a little bit work piling up on a few key people, right? So, every MSP has that one person who everything flows through. That could be the owner if it's a smaller shop, it could be maybe a manager or operations person, or it could just be like, they've only got one L3 or one L2 guy, right? Um, why does that happen?
So I would say, let's ignore a three-person MSP because they're going to be in a struggle until they hire.
Mhm,
So because there's nobody to escalate to. But in a larger MSP, let's just say eight. Let's say you've got eight technicians total. If it keeps going to the same person, generally you need to force escalations to go to another escalation point so that you force training in your environment because it's always going to be the same person and you have a huge risk at that point of that person calling in sick. And
mhm,
so you need to force it. The other risk here, the flip side of that is, so in the first case, the person might be getting all the tickets, but they don't want it. In the second case, you might have a micromanager who wants all the tickets. And if you're the owner that's forcing all the tickets to come to you, you're not going to scale. That's a habit you're going to have to kick. So I would say one is because you just have an old legacy escalation path, and it always goes to Susan, and Susan's your go-to point for all big tickets. And the way to do that, you need to start cross training and forcing some of those tickets to route to somebody else. And the other option is if you're a manager or the owner, and you just by your nature want all the tickets to go to you, then you're just going to be overwhelmed, always behind. And the only solution is just to replace yourself with a technician that can handle those tickets. Basically, you need to hire a replacement for yourself. Otherwise,
okay.
tickets are just going to keep getting backlogged and you're going to lose customers because of it.
So, do you think this is a hiring problem, a trust problem, or a structure problem?
It really depends on the MSP. I would say I'm gonna invent a number here. Let's say 60% of the problem in a help desk is hiring because they're either too slow to hire or they're too slow to fire. And I know that the old mantra is hire slow, fire fast, but I'll share experience from my MSP. The biggest mistake I repeated several times was we would start growing quickly and I would not hire fast enough to retain the revenue. And I believe that's common. It's a conservative mindset of I've wasted money on bad hires in the past. Let's see how this plays out. But you're guaranteeing you're going to lose revenue over the long term with that approach. You need a sales funnel when you grow. You also need a hiring funnel when you grow. So I would say that 60% of the issue there would be hiring. What were the other two that you mentioned? Do you remember?
Uh, hiring problem, trust problem, structure problem. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, trust problems. That's usually a micromanager problem. I mean, there's
Yeah.
three ways to manage in this world that I'm aware of. You can delegate, you can abdicate, or you can micromanage, right? The delegator, you delegate and you monitor. The abdicator is like, get this done, they leave, they can't, they never are there to help you. And the micromanager, which is probably the most common, um, is the one that's really going to cause an obstacle for the MSP. Really, what you want to do is you want to start focusing on the who, not the how, when you manage an MSP.
Okay. And so, if it is the answer, hire someone to help them. Like, if we've got one guy and all the escalations are going there, I don't know that I'm hearing the answer. I think so far we're all always just talking about the problem, right? So is the problem that we need to train the guys who keep doing the escalations?
It depends on your capacity. So, I mean,
Yeah.
your existing capacity. If you have somebody that you believe you can train up and they have capacity to take on the work, then you would train them up. I would say most MSPs run pretty lean with their staff. Most likely, if you have a single escalation point, you're generally going to have to hire another escalation point. Um, because I just don't know that many MSPs that have a plus one, plus two on their staff that just has a ton of excess capacity. So that's why I say the who is generally you should be focused as a manager or owner on the who, not the how. You need to be actively hiring at all times. Doesn't mean you're going to pull the trigger that day, but you need to have somebody queued up that can help your escalation point. And then when you bring on more contracts, you bring on a third escalation point, and suddenly you have a tier two or tier three team take those tickets.
Hmm.
And everybody looks at you and they're like, well, you have such a well run help desk. Look at how formalized everything is. And that's just because you kept hiring the right people. So hiring is definitely the solution more often than not.
Okay. Now, this feels connected to maybe like being interrupted sometimes, right? Because if you've got L1 guys who are constantly having to like answer calls and put out fires, it might be easier for them to just escalate something, right? Than to have a bigger ticket load.
Yeah. So let's talk about interruptions. So your tier one, let's kind of formalize how you're going to get a high performing help desk. If you're a sports fan, right, you can run a screen, right? You block somebody for another person. Your tier one is constantly running a screen for your tier two and tier three.
Mhm.
Right. And in fact, as you build out your help desk, you're going to hire a person um to block for tier one. Like a lot of organizations hire what is like called a quick fix or like a micro tier one, right? They take the initial hit, they only escalate tickets they can't solve in 10 or 15 minutes. Tier one escalates any tickets they can't solve in 60 minutes and so on. And so to minimize interruptions, you want all inbound traffic going to your tier one. You do not want tier two or tier three taking any inbound traffic at all because they're focused on bigger picture issues. And then the next thing is, again, it goes back to the first solution. If tier one is constantly interrupting tier two, you got to pull a rule in place. Thou shall not escalate or bother if you haven't worked 47.2 minutes on a ticket. Thou shalt not escalate unless you've done this minimum checklist on this ticket. If you do that, you're really going to force your tier one to do the good work. And the good news is, if you put this framework into place, you're quickly going to understand who should not be on your team.
I love that. Now, I think the 47.2 minutes might have just been you pulling a number out of thin air,
Yes.
right?
Yes. You
Okay.
work blue
You
32
wouldn't want
minutes.
an L1 guy working 47 minutes on a ticket before escalating, would you?
It depends. So if you don't have a quick fix person that's in front of tier one, and good again, quick fix is like 10 or 15 minutes max.
Mhm.
Right. So if tickets go straight to tier one, then you would either say 30 or 60 minutes. Pretty common. One of those two. And
Okay.
you generally don't want tier one working on ticket for hours. That is not the function of tier one. Because remember, tier
Okay.
one's real function is running screen for the rest of the tiers. And so if they're working on ticket for 6 hours, how can they do that and take all the little micro tickets? You can't do both.
I mean, you can try.
Well, a lot of MSPs try and there's still four people, four-person shops. And that's not anything wrong with the four-person shop, but you're not going to scale with that mindset.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's pivot. The next one that was chosen on the poll was to, and I just want to clarify, guys, right now we're talking about the problems. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking about some solutions. Okay. So I don't want you guys to think we're just sitting here complaining for an hour. Just want to clarify. Uh, the last problem I see here is too many tools, not enough integration is like the choice they chose. So why do you think MSPs end up with a pile of tools that don't talk to each other? I have an idea as a former MSP. I can tell you, I I have that like shiny toy syndrome. Like you show me something cool, I'm like, heck yes, I'm gonna buy that, man. And chances are like, okay, I just bought a subscription, a 1-year subscription to become a better bass player. Lots of lessons, like uh not in person, but like Zoom meetings, like the whole thing, like to make me better, right? Logged in once, I've used it for 15 minutes. Why do we do this to ourselves?
So the number one, well, that's two separate problems. There's the lack of integration, and then why do we buy tools we don't necessarily need? Um, and so let's talk about both of them. The first thing is the reason we buy tools that we don't need is because we buy tools that we want, right? So you want to be a better player, but you don't have an emotional need to be a better player,
Mhm.
right? And so you're going to buy these things because it just seems like it's the right thing to do. One of the best sayings I ever heard was don't should yourself.
Don't what?
Don't should yourself. Like I should do this.
Got it. Okay.
Should
Sorry, I heard don't shit yourself, and that's always good
well,
advice, just so we're
yeah.
clear.
Some of us learn that lesson early, some learn it late, but we all learn that lesson. But, should, as in, I should go to the gym. I should eat better. I should go for walks more often. That's really just you verbally guilting yourself, but you're not gonna solve it because you're nobody responds to "I should," right? And so, the number one reason people buy tools they don't need is because they think they should buy the tool because it should help them in some way, but there's not a specific pain driving that. Like I won't name names, but when I was at MSP, we did do the subscription for this great network scanning documentation tool, and it connects to a million different endpoints and it monitors changes. And it's a good tool. But after 2 years, we kind of got rid of it because, as great as it was, it didn't improve our profitability and it didn't decrease our ticket count. So I was like, yeah, it's great data, and maybe for another MSP they could have leveraged it better. But now I just have another system to maintain, but it hasn't made me richer and it hasn't made my team happier. So why do I have this tool? And it's just
Yeah,
because I felt like I should document these things. Um,
awesome.
Now in terms of integrations, so I'll speak to Rocketship real quick. So we fully integrate to the PSA. I will agree with you is generally when we're onboarding people, I make little jokes here and there. One of my running jokes is that's the truth is, your technician does not want to log into another portal. They're kind of done with the 4,000 portals they have to log into, right? And
Mhm.
there is a lack of strong integration. And I think it's a mistake from the vendors in this and a lot of different spaces, which is when you introduce a new tool into the environment, if you have to change your workflow a lot, how the people work, you're really going to have a potential rebellion on your hands because it's not integrating. And I know that the poll is asking something differently about integrating, but the reality is when people say integrating, they mean, is it integrating into my workflow? And
Mm.
most tools do not integrate into the workflow. And that's the problem.
Okay. I mean, I'm not loving these responses because you're just making it sound like we're all doing it wrong.
Well, I would say I would say on the, when it comes to on the shoulda stuff, SHOULD for clarity. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I don't think you're doing it wrong. I think humanity, that's just how people operate. They see something bright and shiny, it makes them feel good. You get a little serotonin hit from buying this, and then you envision these wondrous lessons you're gonna take, but there's not enough of an emotional driver. I feel like that's just the human condition. Welcome to waking up in the morning. In terms of the integrations, yeah, that's just a systemic failure on vendors' parts not of trying to force people into, you know what it is? I say we're opinionated in how our software works, vendors want to come up with this idea that they're not opinionated. Hey, our platform can do whatever you want. You just got to configure all these things. Well, people don't want that. They want an opinionated piece of software that says, hey, look, if you are an MSP that operates this way, then we're going to plug into that process and then we're going to make that way better. And that really is the solution, which is your software should be opinionated. And that opinion should either make you not want to buy it or make you want to love it. But it should be one of the either. It shouldn't be a tepid response of, oh, yeah, I'll spend 6 months configuring this and then maybe we get it to integrate into our workflow.
Okay. What do you see MSPs buying that they don't actually need? And does that answer vary based on every MSP?
No, I would say MSPs monitor more things than they should, and because they feel like they should. The sheer volume of tickets we see that come through our software that are never worked, and people will say, "Hey, look, I created this awesome, process in Rocketship where it all auto closes in this situation if it's not worked or whatever." I'm like, "That's great, but why are we creating these tickets?" And just the insane number of tickets help desk have for things that they monitor and alerts they're getting that they just ignore on a regular basis. I'm like, why are you monitoring all this stuff? Like, just monitor for security risk and down an outage. I would argue that particularly a small MSP, if you're monitoring for anything that's not outage related or security related, you're probably not working the tickets. You need to get rid of them.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, guys, are solutions. Okay. But first, we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to talk about our platforms. Okay. So we're gonna do a little sponsored segment. And then what I would love is if you guys have questions, I mean, the chat is open. You guys can say whatever, ask whatever, troll us, whatever makes you happy. Uh the chat is for you to use, okay? So Dustin, I would love if or do you feel ready to go first with a little commercial about Giant Rocket Ship?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to do it. I'm ready.
Sure, go for it, man.
Yeah. So Rocketship fully automates triage, assignment, and scheduling. So Rocketship ensures work is the right people do the right work, and they do it at the right time. It's particularly tuned for shops with 8 or more technicians, and it can almost completely automate that dispatcher role. And if you have a dispatcher, great. Now they're going to be a service coordinator. And so it's made a huge difference to all of our customers. I'll tell you the number one compliment we get is when a customer says, "We just lost 2 of our engineers, and we're just not going to replace them. We don't need to do more hires right now." And it's because of how Rocketship is moving work around. And so that's what we do.
Very cool. All right. Well, let me pull my thing up. I guess I could have like warned you if you wanted to like share your screen, you could have. Um, I
Well,
know field
I'd
note.
argue like I love visualizations,
Yeah,
but I would say particularly for Rocketship, if people don't understand what I'm saying verbally, then
they're not
either
going to get
it's
it.
not a good fit for them, or I'm doing a horrible job pitching.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. So Dustin and I have been talking about friction, right? The stuff that quietly slows you down, your MSP, as you guys scale. And I would be doing a disservice if I didn't mention that accounts receivable, AR, is one of those things that can sneak up on you, right? So when you're small, you're chasing invoices, it's annoying, but manageable. You know, when you're growing, it starts eating real hours. Your ops person becomes a collections agent, clients email asking for invoice copies, someone's card expired and no one noticed for 3 weeks. Alternative payments helps MSPs get paid faster with a lot less manual work. Your clients will get their own portal. They can log in, see their invoices, update payment information, and can even turn on auto pay. And that means you stop being the person who has to ask for money because the money just shows up. And those "can you resend my invoice" requests? Gone. Your clients can pull that up themselves anytime. That's time back in your day you didn't even realize you were losing. Now, here's where it gets fun for your accounting team, or you if you're still doing this yourself. We integrate with 15 platforms today, more accounting integrations than any other MSP focused payment platform. The most popular ones are ConnectWise, Autotask, and Halo PSA on the PSA side, QuickBooks, Xero, FreshBooks, NetSuite on accounting. Here's the flow. You're going to create the invoice in your PSA just like normal. It's going to sync to your accounting platform just like normal, and it's going to sync to us. We'll send out the payment notification. And by we, I mean, our software. You're going to set it up. It takes like 30 minutes to set up. If the client's on auto pay, we'll just run the auto pay. If not, we'll send reminders on your schedule, whatever schedule you want. We've got suggestions. Um, when the client pays, we mark it paid in your PSA and in your accounting platform. We deposit the funds into your bank, sometimes as soon as tomorrow. And when that deposit hits, we create the deposit record in your accounting software, associate all related payments, and include any fees. So that way, when you download your bank feed, everything matches. Reconciliation, done. You touch nothing. Most of our customers eliminate about 80% of their manual AR work. They're getting paid faster because, well, it turns out people pay you quicker when you make it easy. On credit card fees, you can pass those to your clients if you want, and it's as granular as you need. Maybe you exclude clients who are on auto pay. Maybe you exclude specific clients because reasons. Your call. We've also got financing if you need to help a client push a deal over the line, and collections assist if someone defaults on payments, so you're not left holding the bag. So I am going to launch a poll. Check behind the Zoom window if you don't see it. Sometimes it hides. If you think alternative payments might save you some time, maybe even save you some money, let's have a conversation because a conversation couldn't hurt. And I will, in a few minutes, I will run a poll for Dustin and Giant Rocketship as well. But this one is live for now. All right. Cool.
Man, it was great. A real quick comment, I guess, for your audience.
Yeah.
I'll share that one of our biggest failings that I had as an MSP and something that I got really optimized in the last third of the MSP was just payment management. And the big struggle for us at my MSP was we were always financing our customers for way too long, and it definitely hampered our growth. But once we really got a lockdown on payments and the method and the scheduling of that, it had a profound impact on our ability to hire. So, no, I think that's a great solution. It was always an impactful issue for us.
Well, thank you very much. All right. So, what is a quick win when it comes to like fixing escalations that doesn't require a full overhaul?
The quickest win is that one, you need to stop anybody but tier one from accepting inbound tickets. So tier one only takes the new tickets
Okay.
because you're distracting the people with the deeper, more difficult tickets from getting those things done because they need more attention and more concentration. So number one, tier two, tier three does not take phone calls.
Okay.
They do not take new tickets. Everything goes through tier one. Number two, and this fixes the dysfunction of an escalation system, which is you put specific rules for tier one for when and when they cannot escalate tickets. How
Um,
long must they work on a ticket? And what is the data needed before they can escalate a ticket? So by doing that, you definitely going to reduce the I just don't feel like working this ticket escalation, which is what breeds distrust in the escalation process.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that second one you can do today. I acknowledge that first one where you have a strict like breakout of who can accept new tickets, that sometimes takes a little bit of negotiation in your help desk team. But that second one where you put rules in place for escalations, you can literally do that today in 30 minutes, executive decree, and it will have a profound impact on your escalations.
Okay. So let's say they have a dispatcher. So the calls should come into the dispatcher and they should dispatch only to tier one, unless it's like you know the network's down or something. But even then, it should probably go to tier one and make sure. Let's restart your modem and
Let's
the
call the
basics.
ISP, log a ticket. Absolutely. There's almost no ticket scenario you can give me where you should bypass tier one.
Hmm.
Right? Because can't tier one call the ISP to figure out, hey, is the internet down? I'm gonna reboot the modem while you check the internet connectivity on your end. Like, why can't tier one do that?
That's fair. I mean, I don't.
My AWS database service is down,
Mhm.
right? So argument, well, why is tier one working in AWS and a infrastructure as a service platform? At a minimum, they can check down detector to see if AWS is having an issue, log and say down detector says that AWS is fully online. And then they can say, oh, okay, well, I'm being told that we know the database is down because their line of business app is not working. Let me log into the terminal server. You're right. Our test account is, in fact, not working and it's giving a database error. Here's the screenshot because you never trust the user. We all know you cannot trust a user's decision on what is the problem. And now tier two or tier three doesn't have to do all the legwork of verifying what the user said.
Hmm. Okay. And does fixing this require tool changes or just process changes?
It really depends. Like if you don't have a dispatcher, I would say 20% of our customers come in and say, hey, look, we have 7 technicians. And just so that the room understands, from what we've seen, you're going to have one dispatcher for every 8 to 10 technicians. It's about it. It's like let's call it an industry ratio. So if you have 15 technicians, 80% of MSPs are going to have 2 dispatchers at that point,
Okay.
one and a half. They're going to be struggling with just one. Um, I just talked myself in circles. What was the question?
Does fixing this require tool changes or just process changes?
Yeah. So you can do a process change. I would say if you don't want to hire a dispatcher and you start doing escalations, I would say 25% of our customers, they bring in Rocketship specifically because they want to automate the whole triage and assignment process and they don't want to hire a dispatcher. If you do have, 10, 12 technicians and you have a dispatcher and they're gonna be struggling at that point. So Rocketship would come in and formalize 80% of the triage and assignments, and your dispatcher really becomes a coordinator and helps with any kind of weird ticket assignments and engages more with the customer. So, I mean, obviously, this is a plug for us. When it comes to triage and escalations, Rocketship's kind of like in the front of the pack of how that works. So, obviously, I'm going to say Rocketship's going to solve that problem. If it's process only, generally you need to hire a dispatcher to
Okay.
execute.
Okay. Let's see what other issue are we going to solve today?
I'm trying to look for that poll you had because it has some really good stuff on it. You did your research.
I try, man. I
Oh,
try.
let's see.
You know, one first things first, I'm going to launch the giant rocket ship poll. If you guys are interested in having a conversation with Dustin about how he and the team at Giant Rocket Ship could help your MSP, all you got to do is say, sure, a conversation couldn't hurt on that poll. Meanwhile, I have, based on the poll results, I actually have uh, content for every single result. So I'm actually just going through them real quick. So, you mentioned let's make sure you have a dispatcher or two. So let's keep talking about that. Let's keep talking about like building team structure and role clarity. So, if someone wants to fix role clarity, what's the first step?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't publicize this too much, but I still do a little bit of MSP consultants. I generally have two customers, and I will tell you this comes up a lot, which is I'm not clear who does what in my help desk. Right? Does my tier two is doing a bunch of networking, and are they giving some leadership to tier one? I'd say the first thing to understand what role clarity is, if we go back to the tiers or the levels of your help desk, um, your first tier is going to be a rapid response hit squad, right? They're not deep on Windows. They're not deep on desktops. I mean, they can obviously train on that, but their job is how quickly can I work? How much can I multitask? And am I like a, am I trying to constantly accelerate out of these tickets? Your tier two, their role is typically going to be PC focused, right? They're trying to figure out the big issues. And obviously, tier three is your engineers. Now, the other roles that you want to focus on are going to be your dispatcher slash service coordinator. I would argue a dispatcher is inward facing, a service coordinator is outward facing. And
Mhm.
so a dispatcher is doing a lot of paperwork with your tickets, triaging, moving them around. Whereas a service coordinator is working with the team, but also the customers to keep things moving and being fluid. Um, Another role that I think is very important in the help desk is a service manager. And I would argue that sometimes the worst service manager can be the owner
Mm.
because he's got too many conflicting emotions around tickets and he's not willing to sacrifice one ticket to solve 10 others. Whereas a service manager can make that decision that, hey, I'm willing to make this one customer upset to save these other 10 customers, a much more difficult decision for an owner. So, just a quick note, obviously, smaller MSP owners are going to be the service manager, even if they don't have that title, but owners rarely make great service managers.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, how do you handle the person who's been doing everything and now needs a narrower role? Because the one thing I'll say is when you start taking responsibilities away, it can feel liberating in on one end, right? But it can also feel a little scary on the other
Yes.
end because when you start taking things away, like, first of all, what if you're taking away something they actually really enjoy? And then 2, what if you're giving them the fear of, "Oh, wait, are they, like do they
Gonna
not
let
like me anymore? Are they getting rid of me? Like, what?" But it's important for you to start having, like, specialists in your business, right?
Yeah, I think that's, honestly, I haven't really thought about that to the depth that you're asking. I think it's a great question. I would say, not as giant rocket ship founder, but as MSP previous owner, um, if you have a single escalation point and you want to diversify, you want to break that up into two people, then I think you need to sit down with that person and you need to tackle this as a team. I would say this. Let's say that, Steve, you were my tier three technician and you're my escalation point. I would say, Steve, I think we both know that you have an endless number of tickets coming at you all the time. I
Mhm.
think we both know that is a risk to you. You're going to burn out. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be direct with you, Steve. You're a risk to me right now. I can't have you burning out. You're one of my guys, right? So what I think we need to do is we need to bring in another Steve so I can start breaking these tickets up. We either
Mm.
just do 50-50, or we need to carve out who's specialized in what. Let's talk about it and see how it works out. But knowing that we need to de-risk, management speak, Steve, how do you think we need to execute on this? I wouldn't ask your permission
Mm.
to do the thing, but I would ask your input for how to execute on the thing.
Okay. That's solid. Um, that's really solid, especially because now you're almost you're inviting a little bit of ownership here, right? And if they do well, maybe that person can be like a lead in that type of role, right?
Yeah, I think one of the problem the well, you let's talk about a little bit of leadership dysfunction. I think people get themselves into a corner when they ask permission when they shouldn't from their staff,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes you need to do things and you don't need permission. And people get them in trouble when they go the other way, which is they get no they don't ask permission, but they also don't ask for input or ownership on that thing. And so, in one direction, you have a staff that's just going to bully you. The other direction, you're going to have a staff that just fears your decision making because of the executive whirlwind that happens. I guess they call it really the executive tornado. So, I think you need to make executive decisions, but you need to actively work to bring people into ownership on how that decision is going to play out.
Okay. All right. Now, if we wanted to talk about maybe we want to let's pivot again. Let's talk about creating documentation and process consistency. So, the D word that everyone doesn't like, right? Because it's boring. So everyone knows they need documentation. Why doesn't it happen? And like what's the minimum documentation that an MSP needs to operate well?
Okay, this comes under the I should problem, which is I should document everything. Most MSPs do not have time to document everything about a customer site. So I would argue the first thing is you need to decide what's the minimum documentation you can make to survive, right? So if I'm a 10-person team, I might say the minimum documentation I'm going to get during onboarding is my passwords, my my Active Directory settings, my GPOs, but I probably don't need to document every setting, every wire, everything, right? And
Mhm.
so the first problem is people either don't document or they go on this blitz to document everything and they burn out. So I would say what's the minimum, let's call it instead of a MVP, minimum viable product, let's call it the MVD. Minimum viable documentation is the best solution you can have as an MSP. And then the next thing is we put technicians into a pickle all the time, which is, hey, I want you getting X number of tickets done per day. By the way, I'm going to give you this unschedulable, like unknowable, nebulous task, which is as you work tickets, I want you to document everything. Okay, so I just went from working a ticket for 5 minutes to 2 hours or 10 minutes. I don't know. I have no control over my schedule. So, one of the problems is we're asking technicians to be constantly documenting all the time, but then we hold them to this arbitrary number of tickets to close every day, right? So, you put
Mm.
them into a bind. I would say use a little programmer speak. Somewhat, you need asynchronous jobs here. You need the technicians working the tickets and closing them as fast as possible. You need machinery in place that lets them spin up new tickets saying, I was unable to find this documentation I wish I had. Right. And what I found at my MSP, and I've seen others do it, which is you actually have a queue or a board of nothing but tickets for documentation. Hey, I need this documentation. Hey, we have outdated documentation on their SQL server. Hey, we're missing that documentation. And then you assign those tickets out like regular tickets, and that becomes how you keep your documentation updated.
Okay.
So just to repeat, because I feel like this is important, if you're expecting your technicians to keep your documentation updated while they're working, it becomes very difficult for them to meet your numbers, to hit your KPIs, because you've given them a task where they can't predict work, but you've given them a set objective for the day. And that's difficult to combine those two.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, we I mean, we've got like 50 seconds left, so I
Well,
don't think
Steve, this is a great podcast. I've never had a chance to really drill down into service desk speak so much. This was great.
I'm really glad that you got to enjoy it. I am hopeful that more and more people not only start to, show up live, but watch on YouTube and everything else. So for those of you wondering, uh, maybe you were multitasking. This will be sent out to you tomorrow in an email, so that way you can watch the replay. Okay, so uh, thank you, Dustin. Thank you, everyone who attended live. And next week we've got definitely one webinar with TAG, the Technology Assurance Group, and that one's gonna help you understand how to do better sales. I think that one's gonna be a cool one for you guys. So, thanks so much, everybody. Y'all have a good one.